I counted them twice, not because I thought I miscounted the first time. I counted them twice because I wanted to be sure I was enjoying this correctly. 47 Candra's warships sitting in a formation so tight and so perfect it looked like someone had painted them there, each one bigger than my entire frigate, each one carrying enough firepower to turn a moon into a memory, and all 47 of them pointed with what I could only describe as enthusiastic commitment directly at me. The comms crackled. Human vessel, you are completely surrounded. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded or you will be destroyed. The voice belonged to Vethurin Fleet, commander of the Candra's 3rd Expansion Force. I knew his name because his ship was broadcasting its registry on an open frequency, which told me something useful about how seriously he took the humans he went after. He did not bother hiding. He did not need to. Not from anyone who had ever faced him before. I was not anyone who had faced him before. I clicked the comms open. Copy that, I said. Give me a minute. I clicked it closed and went back to my maps. My name is Yara Voss, Sergeant Commander, Earth Allied Defense, currently aboard the resupply frigate unincorporated, currently sitting in the outer edge of the Candra's nebula with 12% engine capacity, a hull held together by expired sealant tape and what I can only describe as the stubbornness of metal that has been through worse, and a crew complement of exactly 0 because I had evacuated them 4 hours ago when this whole situation started looking the way it was now conclusively looking. The unincorporated was not a warship. I want to be very clear about that. She was built to carry medical supplies and replacement parts between station depots. She had 2 short-range defense cannons that were technically functional, if you define functional as might fire. If you ask nicely, she had no long-range weapons. She had no escort. She had a drive system that topped out at 60% under perfect conditions and was currently performing at a generous 12 because a Candra's patrol ship had clipped our rear thruster array 40 minutes ago. What she did have was a very good sensor suite, because resupply ships need to know what is around them in busy transit corridors, and the engineer who had installed it 2 years ago on Depot 7 had done so using mil-spec hardware from a decommissioned scout vessel because she believed in doing things properly. Her name was Donna. She was currently on an escape pod somewhere in the outer belt heading toward the nearest relay beacon. I hope she was comfortable. I looked at the sensor map. 47 ships, formation type Candra's, standard encirclement pattern 4. I had read about pattern 4 in the tactical database back when I was doing my certification coursework. The instructor's note beside it had said, simply, if you find yourself facing this formation, your options are limited. I had thought about that note a lot over the years. I was thinking about it now. The thing about pattern 4 is that it is designed to be airtight. Every ship covers the escape vectors of the ships. Beside it, every firing arc overlaps with 2 others. It assumes the target will try to run. It assumes the target will try to punch through a weak point. Every possible exit a standard tactical computer would model was covered by at least 3 ships simultaneously. It was genuinely an extraordinary piece of military engineering. It also had one structural property that its designers had apparently never considered worth worrying about, because the situation it created had never, as far as the Kandras were concerned, been anything other than a guarantee of their own victory. If you put 47 ships in a formation that tight in a nebula with this specific magnetic profile, and you pointed all their targeting arrays at a single central point, those arrays would begin cross-referencing each other's signals. It was a feature, not a flaw. It made the targeting more precise. It made their coordination nearly perfect. It also meant that anything sitting exactly at the center of that formation would register to each individual ship's targeting system as a signal originating from the other ships in the formation. I would not disappear from their sensors. I would become indistinguishable from themselves. Vethurin's voice came back on comms, slightly less patient this time. Human vessel, you have not powered down. This is your final warning. I looked at the nav console. There was a photo wedged into the crack in the bezel. Folded small, the edges soft from handling. I did not look at it directly. I knew it was there. I hear you, I said into the comms. I am working through some calculations. A pause on the other end. I could hear faintly what sounded like another voice. In the background, one of his officers, probably asking why he was still talking to me. Fair question. I pulled up the route plotter and started drawing a line, not outward, not toward any of the exit vectors that a standard tactical computer would flag as possible, inward, deeper into the formation, toward the exact geometric center of all 47 ships. The route plotter flagged it. Immediately, red warning, obstacle, collision risk, multiple weapon lock, probabilities. It generated a little numerical readout of how bad the idea was, and the number it generated was high enough that it briefly seemed like the computer was judging me personally. I cleared the warning. I opened a channel, not to Vethurin, not to any of the 47 ships sitting around me. I opened the Galactic Council emergency frequency, the one reserved for diplomatic incidents and active conflict disclosures, the one that every species with a council seat was legally required to monitor at all hours. I did not say anything yet. I just opened it and let it sit like a door left ajar. Then I started moving, not fast. The drives could not do fast right now. Anyway, I moved at the calm, deliberate speed of someone who has decided exactly where they are going and is not concerned about what stands between them and that place. The nearest Kandra's ship was a heavy cruiser designation, pattern consistent with their Vane-class line, 400 m of Kandra's engineering and bad intentions, currently sitting approximately 2,000 km off my port side. My new course would take me within 600 km of it. A new weapons lock tone started from my console, then another, then three more. I turned the alert volume down. The sensor suite showed me the Kandra's formation shifting just slightly. The ships nearest my new heading were adjusting their positions by small degrees, trying to get clean firing angles on me. But Pattern 4 does not accommodate a target that moves toward the center. The formation was designed for things that run. When I moved inward, two ships on the far side of the formation had to adjust to avoid their firing arcs sweeping across two of their own vessels. They adjusted. I kept moving. What are you doing? Vethurin said. He was not giving warnings now. He sounded like a man trying to work something out. I told you, I said, calculations. Another weapons lock tone. I had 6 ships with active targeting locks on me. Now 6 ships that were also because of where I was and because of the magnetic interference layering through the nebula around us, beginning to register trace return signals from each other ghost signatures. Friendly ships, looking to their own systems slightly like me. Nothing that would cause them to fire on each other, not yet, not unless I was sitting at the precise center, and I was not there yet. 2 minutes, maybe 3. Vethurin spoke again, and this time there was something underneath his voice that had not been there before, not anger, something closer to the particular quiet that comes before a very large decision. Human, what is your exit strategy? I looked at the cracked bezel, the folded photo I never looked at directly. Working on it, I said. I kept the channel to the Galactic Council open and said nothing into it. Nothing yet. Just let 47 ships and every Council monitor in range hear the sound of one human frigate moving without apparent fear toward the center of everything that was supposed to kill it. The weapons lock tones kept stacking. I turned the volume down a little more. The center of the formation was 90 seconds away. I had 11 minutes after that before any of this would need to work. I was not going to think about the 11 minutes after that. I looked at the route plotter. The line I had drawn went to the center and stopped. There was nothing drawn beyond it. The computer had not flagged this as a problem because the computer assumed I would figure out the rest later. The computer and I were, for once, in complete agreement. 4 hours ago, I had been eating a protein bar in the unincorporated small galley and reviewing a manifest of replacement coolant units bound for Depot 12 when the proximity alert had gone off. Not the soft proximity alert, the one that sounds like someone being impolite. I had walked to the bridge still holding the protein bar and pulled up the sensor sweep, and the sensor sweep had shown me 2 Khandros patrol ships running an intercept course. Not unusual in this region. The Khandros had been aggressive in the outer transit corridors for 6 months, testing response times, pushing lines. Everyone knew it. Command knew it. The diplomatic corps knew it. The Galactic Council had issued 3 formal statements about it, each one slightly stronger than the last. Each one producing approximately nothing. The patrol ships were not stopping me for a polite chat. Their weapons arrays were already hot. I had evacuated the crew in just under 8 minutes. Donna had argued with me for 45 seconds. Of that, which was 20 seconds more than anyone else, and completely consistent with her general approach to everything. I had told her the escape pods were faster than the patrol ships boarding crews and that she needed to go now, and she had looked at me with the specific expression she reserved for situations where she agreed with me but found agreeing with me personally offensive. She went, though. The 2 patrol ships had hit our rear thruster array while I was cycling the last pod loose, not enough to stop me, enough to leave me at 12%. They had apparently expected that to be the end of it. A crippled resupply frigate, no crew, no combat capacity. They moved to pull alongside and begin boarding procedures. I had taken the unincorporated into the nebula. They had followed, and then they had called their friends. I had not planned for 47. I want to be Honest about that, I had planned for the 2 patrol ships, and I had planned for them calling reinforcements, and I had done the math on what a standard K'Handro's reinforcement response to a fleeing target in this specific nebula would look like. The number I had calculated was closer to 20. 47 was excessive. 47 was the kind of number that told you someone had made this personal, which was, if I was being precise about it, the only reason any of this might work, because 47 ships in pattern 4 formation in a magnetic nebula is not just an encirclement. It is a very large, very expensive, very proud statement. And proud statements, in my experience, have a specific vulnerability. They desperately need an audience. I was currently inside the formation, 90 seconds from center, 6 weapons locks, active and climbing. The magnetic interference was doing exactly what the physics said it would. The ghost signatures were multiplying. Each K'Handro's ship's targeting array was talking to the others, cross-referencing, triangulating, building a picture of where I was that kept folding back on itself because I was sitting in the one place the system's geometry could not cleanly resolve. I was not invisible. I was to 47 targeting systems simultaneously, too central to be a clean target without risking a friendly fire solution. Vethurin had gone quiet, which was not the same as gone. I reached the center. I checked the timer I had running in the corner of my display. 11 minutes until the targeting confusion degraded enough for them to get clean solutions on me regardless. 11 minutes until the magnetic cross-referencing stopped being a problem for them and started being just a dead human in a broken frigate. 11 minutes. I looked at the Galactic Council. Channel still open, still silent. I looked at the 47 ships around me in a perfect circle, the most expensive trap ever built for the worst possible target. I looked at the folded photo in the cracked bezel. Then I pulled the comms up, took one breath and started talking. Not to Vethurin. To everyone. This is Sergeant Commander Yara Voss of the Earth Allied Defense aboard the resupply frigate Unincorporated. I am currently at the geometric center of a K'Handro standard encirclement. Pattern 4, consisting of 47 vessels. I am transmitting my sensor logs, my navigation records, and a full account of the events of the last 4 hours on all available frequencies, including this Council Emergency Channel. A pause. I am also, I said, about to show you something interesting. The timer read 10 minutes and 43 seconds. I started phase 2. The thing nobody tells you about being the most dangerous person in a room is that the room does not know it yet. All 47 ships were still pointing at me. They just could not agree on exactly where I was. I had 3 ideas about how to use that. Only one of them required me to survive. I filed that one under options and kept moving. The K'Handro's targeting array architecture is, and I say this with full professional respect, a masterpiece of coordinated fire control engineering. Each ship in a formation shares sensor data in real time, lock one target and the entire formation locks simultaneously. Fire one weapon and the others adjust their arcs in under 2 seconds. It is the reason a K'Handro's encirclement has a near-perfect historical record. There is no gap, there is no hesitation. There is only the math of where you are, and the math of what happens to you. There, the weakness, and I had found it in a technical paper written by a Vandary academic 12 years ago that had 17 reads. In the entire Galactic database was this. The array is built on the assumption of a common external reference point. Every ship in the formation triangulates from the others. Ship 1 says, the target is here relative to me. Ship 2 says, the target is here relative to me. The array's central processor takes those relative positions and resolves them into an absolute coordinate, clean, fast, lethal, unless the target is positioned at a point where the magnetic field of the surrounding environment introduces consistent phase offset into each ship's sensor return. In that case, each ship's relative position reading is shifted by a small but consistent margin. The array's central processor receives 47 slightly different readings and attempts to resolve them. It cannot. The target appears to the system to be in 47 slightly different places simultaneously. The system does not crash. It keeps trying. It flags the readings as an environmental anomaly and keeps trying to resolve them. This process, according to the Vandary paper, takes approximately 11 to 14 minutes before the system switches to backup targeting protocols that do not rely on cross-formation triangulation. I had 11 minutes. What I needed to accomplish in 11 minutes was not an escape. Let me be plain about that. There was no escape from the center of a pattern 4 formation in a damaged frigate with 12% drive capacity. Any exit vector I ran would take me toward ships that could match my speed at 30% of their own capacity. And GT snorts. And GT, I could not run, I could not fight, I could not wait them out. What I could do was make sure that whatever happened next happened in front of everyone. The council emergency channel was open. I had been speaking for 60 seconds. My sensor logs and navigation records were transmitting on a wideband frequency that every ship in the formation was receiving, along with every council monitoring station within 12 light minutes. I kept talking. The K-Handro's fleet made first contact with the unincorporated at these coordinates 4 hours and 17 minutes ago. At that time, the unincorporated was traveling at standard transit speed on a registered resupply route. Full manifest. Documentation on file. No military cargo, no weapons classified above standard defensive grade. Another tone. I was now holding 8 active targeting locks. The ghost signature problem was making each of those locks cycle between confidence levels, which meant none of them had yet authorized a firing solution. The system kept flagging environmental interference and asking for confirmation. None of the 47 ships were firing. Not yet. The Candro's patrol vessels initiated weapons hot intercept without prior communication, without challenge protocol, and without any stated cause. I have the sensor recordings. I am transmitting them now. In the council chambers, I knew from procedure an alert like mine would have triggered automatic recording and forwarding to every member species. Diplomatic feed, 12 species, 12 sets of ambassadors and analysts, watching a live sensor feed from a broken resupply frigate at the center of a combat formation, listening to a single human woman describe calmly and in Order exactly what had happened and exactly what was happening right now. Vethurin cut in. Commander Voss, his voice had changed. The earlier patience, the slightly theatrical certainty of a fleet commander addressing something he considered already resolved, was gone. What was there now was more careful. This channel is an emergency diplomatic frequency. You are using it to broadcast military operational data. Yes, I said, that is exactly what I am doing. That is a violation of Council Communication Statute 14 Paragraph 6. Paragraph 6 covers commercial and personal use of emergency channels. I am a military officer reporting an active engagement to the Council as required under the Defense Disclosure Act Article 9. I can send you the citation if you would like. A silence. I had 6 minutes and 40 seconds left on my timer. The ghost signatures on the formations targeting systems were getting worse. Not better. I had moved very slightly. Twice since reaching the center, not randomly. I had moved to specific positions that maximized the magnetic interference effect based on the field readings from my sensor suite. Each small movement made the cross-referencing problem slightly harder to resolve. I was not running. I was stirring. What are you trying to accomplish? Vethurin said. And here is the thing about that question. It was the right question. It was the question that told me he had started somewhere in the last few minutes to understand that what was happening was not what it had appeared to be when 47 ships arranged themselves around a broken resupply frigate. He had expected her to run. She had not run. He had expected her to power down. She had not powered down. He had expected at some point something consistent with a target that knew it was losing. She was not doing any of those things. She was doing paperwork out loud in front of the galaxy. I am filing an incident report, I said. I am required by Earth Allied Defense Protocol to document all hostile engagements, and I am required by Council Treaty to report any engagement involving Council adjacent territories to the appropriate diplomatic channels. I am doing both of those things simultaneously because I am efficient. A pause. Then from somewhere in the background of Vethurin's channel, the sound of a second voice, then a third, not shouting something worse, the low, urgent sound of people consulting each other quickly. I checked my sensor display. 3 ships on the far edge of the formation had adjusted their positions, minor adjustments half a degree each, but they were moving, and they were moving in a direction that was not consistent with tightening the encirclement. They were moving away from the angle that would put their own ships in the projected firing arc. They were starting to solve the same geometry problem I had already solved. They knew. Not all 47 of them, not yet, but the flagship knew, and the flagship was talking to the ships nearest it, and in 30 seconds the understanding would spread through the formation like a fault line going. I had 4 minutes left on my timer. I did not need 4 minutes. I opened a second channel alongside the Council frequency. This one was the Candro's fleet's internal command band. I had cracked it during the first 2 hours in the nebula, using the sensor suite signal analysis function and a decryption approach I had read about in a different paper by a different academic that had even fewer readers than the last one. I began transmitting on both channels simultaneously. For the benefit of the Galactic Council, monitors and the Kandros Fleet Command, I said I would like to explain what is currently happening to your targeting array. I explained it, all of it, the magnetic interference, the cross-referencing loop, the ghost signatures. I explained the geometry of why they could not get a clean firing solution on me. I explained the 11-minute window and the fact that we were now at 4 minutes remaining. I explained it calmly, in simple language, the way you explain something to people who are smart enough to follow and who need to follow it quickly. And then I said the thing that mattered. If the Kandros fleet fires on this vessel in the next 4 minutes, each ship's targeting system will read the launch as originating from adjacent formation ships. Your own defensive systems will flag it as a friendly fire event, depending on the number of ships that fire simultaneously. Between 4 and 9 of your own vessels may take automatic evasive or defensive action in response. A silence so complete it had texture. I'm not saying this as a threat, I said. I am saying this as an observation for the record in front of the Galactic Council. What your fleet does with this information is entirely your choice. I will continue filing my incident report. On the Council channel, I heard very faintly the sound of someone on a monitoring station saying something in Vandary that my translator rendered as a sound roughly equivalent to what a person says when they step onto ice they thought was solid. On the Kandros command channel, nothing. Then Vethurin, not giving an order, not issuing a warning, just 2 words quietly in Kandros. Primary. My translator rendered it as hold fire. I looked at the timer. 3 minutes and 51 seconds. I had not needed 4 minutes. I kept transmitting anyway because the record needed to be complete. And because every second I kept talking was another second that the Council monitors were watching a single human woman in a broken resupply frigate calmly documenting everything in the middle of 47 ships that had decided, very recently, not to shoot her. I filed the manifest discrepancy report for the coolant units I had been reviewing before this started, might as well. The timer hit 0. The targeting system switched to backup protocols. I was at that moment a clean target. Nothing fired. Vethurin came back on the channel, just the open channel, the one everyone could hear. Human, what is your exit strategy? I looked at the console, at the cracked bezel, at the folded photo I had not looked at directly in 4 hours. Working on it, I said. And that was true. It was also, if I was being precise, the most complicated truth I had ever told, because an exit strategy implies an exit, and what I had built was a trap that required me to be inside it to work. I had planned for the encirclement. I had planned for the targeting confusion. I had planned for the broadcast and the Council monitors and the political weight of 47 ships documented on record firing on a resupply frigate. I had not planned for the part after that. I had not planned for it because the math I had run very quietly, very alone, in the 2 hours before the fleet arrived, while I was plotting courses and reading old academic papers and wedging a photograph into a cracked console bezel. That math had not included a line for my own retrieval. There was a reason for that. The Council emergency channel chimed. New voice, formal, senior Sergeant Commander Voss, this is Council Speaker Oravan Thau. We have been monitoring your transmission. Ceasefire envoy has been dispatched. You will be contacted shortly. I sat back in the pilot's chair. 47 ships around me, none of them firing. A council speaker on the line. An exit strategy I had not written. I was very tired. Thank you, Speaker, I said. I turned the weapons lock alert back up. There were no active locks. I turned it back down. The retrieval ship arrived 40 minutes. Later, it was a council diplomatic vessel, sleek and white and entirely too pristine for the neighborhood. It came in slowly broadcasting ceasefire. Identifiers on every frequency, and the Candro's formation parted for it the way formations part for things they have been told by people whose opinions matter to them to let through. I watched it approach on the sensor display. The council speaker came back on the channel. Commander Voss, we are sending a boarding team to assist with your extraction. Our preliminary review of your transmission and sensor logs confirms that your account of the incident is accurate and complete. The Candro's fleet has been placed under a formal council stand-down order, pending a full diplomatic review. Thank you, Speaker. Our tactical analysts have also begun reviewing the method you used to neutralize the formation's targeting capability. A pause. It is an extraordinary piece of work, Commander. I did not say anything to that. Our analysts indicate. The speaker continued, and his voice had taken on a quality I had not heard in it before, careful in a way that had nothing to do with diplomacy, that based on the geometry of your position and the drive capacity available to you. There was no viable exit vector from the center of that formation. Their models indicate that your plan did not include a route out. Silence on the channel. Is that correct? The speaker asked. I looked at the photo in the bezel, the edges soft from handling, the fold lines worn in like roads. My crew died at Kessler, I said, because I spent the first 8 minutes of that engagement calculating how to get myself clear before I calculated how to get them clear. 8 minutes, that was the mistake. We had 6 minutes of viable exit window, and I spent 8 minutes deciding whether I was going to use it. One sentence, I let it sit. So this time I did not build a plan. That started with my own exit. I built a plan that started with what needed to work, and I let the rest of the math be whatever it was going to be. The council channel was quiet for a long moment. Then Oravan Thal said carefully, Commander, you are aware that what you are describing is not standard tactical doctrine. Yes, Speaker. Earth Allied Defense Protocol requires. I know what it requires, no heat in it. Just a fact sitting next to another fact. I'm aware that I will need to answer for the protocol deviations in a full debrief. I'm prepared for that. Another silence, longer. Then from an unexpected direction, a third voice on the channel, not the speaker, not the retrieval ship. Vethurin. Still on the open frequency, still in front of everyone. You are not expendable, he said. His translator rendered it in clean, formal terms, but underneath the formality there was something that might have been the Candro's equivalent of reluctant respect, or might have been something harder to name. You were leverage, the distinction matters. I did not answer him for a moment. Yes, I said, you are probably right about that. He was right. I knew he was right. Leverage is a thing you use and then recover, a weapon you pick up and put down. And GT snorts. And GT. What I had built was a plan where I was both the trap and the bait, and traps get recovered and bait does not. I had categorized myself as bait. I was too tired to argue with Vethurin about categories. The boarding team from the retrieval ship cycled through my airlock 17 minutes later, 3 humans and a Vendori analyst. The humans were from Council Security, professional and efficient. The Vendori analyst walked straight to my console, looked at my sensor display, looked at the route I had plotted, and was quiet for a very long time. Her name was Fiora. She had the look of someone who writes papers that gets 17 reads and has made her peace with that. The phase offset calculation, she said finally. How did you run that in real time? The magnetic field readings from inside the nebula are inconsistent. The variance alone would take a full array processor minutes too. I estimated, I said. She looked at me. You estimated a phase offset across 47 targeting array in a variable magnetic field. I had the sensor suite data, and I knew the general architecture of the Kandros array system. The rest was educated guessing. She was quiet again. I wrote a paper, she said, about this exact vulnerability 12 years ago. I know, I said. I read it. The silence that followed had a particular quality, the snorts kind. That happens when 2 people in a room know exactly which 17 reads that paper had and who accounted for how many of them. She looked at the route plotted on my display again, the line that went to the center and stopped. There is nothing drawn past the center, she said. No. She did not ask why. She looked at the cracked bezel, at the photo wedge there. She was perceptive, Fiora. And GT snorts. And GT 17 read papers tend to get written by perceptive people. She did not say anything about the phone. She pulled out a recording device and started documenting the sensor logs quietly and methodically, and I went and sat in the co-pilot seat and let her work. The retrieval ship took the unincorporated under tow at the 2nd hour mark. The Kandros formation held its position as we moved through it. 47 ships, none of them firing, all of them watching. I watched them back on the rear sensor display until we cleared the formation boundary, and they were behind us. Vethurin did not say anything else on the open channel. Neither did I. The debrief took 11 hours, then a second debrief, then a formal council session that I was required to attend in person, which meant a 6-day transit to the council station, which meant 6 days. A small cabin on the retrieval vessel, with nothing to do except review the incident logs I had already memorized, and eat food that was nutritionally complete and completely joyless. I slept a lot, more than I expected. I had not slept much in the months before Kandros. The council session was held in the main chamber of Station Vethara 6, which is a place built to make individuals feel appropriately small and proceedings feel appropriately significant. Tall ceilings, curved walls, light that comes from everywhere and casts no shadows. 12 species seated in tiered sections around a central floor where I stood alone with a speaker's platform and a glass of water that a council aide had placed there, as if water was going to help Council Speaker Oravan Thal opened the session, then he introduced me to the chamber as if everyone there had not already watched my full broadcast 3 times and read the incident report twice, and seen my face on every major news feed in council space for the past week. I had been told before the session that there would be formal statements that several species representatives wanted to speak, that the Kandros delegation had submitted a brief, that Earth Allied Defense Command had submitted a brief, that there were, in short, a great number of opinions about what had happened that were going to be expressed before anyone got to ask me anything. The formal statements took 2.5 hours. I drank the water. When it was finally time for questions, the first one came from a Van Dory council delegate named Aaron Sal, who had the look of someone who had been waiting for the formal statements to end with diminishing patience. "Commander Voss," he said, "your tactical analysis of the Kandros formation's vulnerability was precise and demonstrably effective. However, I want to understand something." He paused. "The encirclement you created, the targeting confusion, the broadcast, the political framing of the incident for council observation, the entire architecture of it, you built something that functioned as one of the most effective counter-encirclement strategies in recorded engagement history." He paused again. "You built it in a nebula, alone in a damaged resupply ship, in approximately 4 hours, using publicly available academic research and a sensor suite from a decommissioned scout vessel." "Yes," I said. "Why?" I had been expecting harder questions than that. I had prepared for harder questions: protocol violations, risk assessment failures, the Kessler issue, which command had definitely flagged and which I knew was coming because it was what the situation required. I said. Aaron Sal shook his head slightly. "That is not what I mean. I mean, why did you know how to do this? This is not standard training. This is not in any Earth Allied Defense Tactical curriculum. The Van Dory paper that describes the targeting array vulnerability has 17 recorded reads in the Galactic academic database. Your approach required synthesizing that paper with real-time magnetic field data and a specific understanding of Kandros fleet communication architecture that is not publicly documented." I looked at him. "I read a lot," I said. A sound went through the chamber, not laughter exactly, something adjacent to it. Oravan Thal sat back. The Kandros delegate, a senior official named Thavron, who had been sitting with careful stillness through the entire session, spoke next. His voice was measured and formal, and the formal quality of it had the texture of something that had been decided before he came into the room. "The Kandros Directorate," he said, "does not contest Commander Voss's account of the engagement. We have reviewed the sensor logs and the transmission record. The patrol vessels acted outside their authorized operational parameters. This will be addressed through internal process." A pause. "We also acknowledge," he said more slowly, "that the situation at the center of the formation, as Commander Voss described it, was accurately assessed. Our fleet commander's decision to issue a hold fire order was correct given the targeting system status at that moment." Another pause. "The Kandros Directorate will be withdrawing its current council seat application for review and resubmission at a future date. The chamber was quiet. That was the political consequence I had. Built the whole thing to create not the engagement, not the targeting trick. This moment right here, this formal statement in a council chamber on the record in front of 12 species. The Candros had been pushing for a council seat for 3 years. The seat would have given them formal neutrality protections that would have significantly complicated Earth allied defense's ability to respond to exactly the kind of corridor aggression that had started this whole chain of events. The withdrawal of that application was not a dramatic military victory. There would be no celebration in the mess halls and no medal ceremony and no version of this that ended up in a tactical training film. It was a diplomatic consequence, quiet and permanent, and exactly what it needed to be. Ora Van Thale looked at me from the speaker's position. Commander Voss, he said, this council would like to formally acknowledge the extraordinary circumstances of your actions and the outcome they produced. Thank you, Speaker. We would also like to understand, he said carefully, your assessment of the risk to yourself. I had known this was coming too. I assessed the risk, I said. And I proceeded. Ora Van Thale was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, the formal register had softened by a fraction. Our analysts determined that your plan did not include a viable extraction route, that you were by the geometry of what you built at the center of something you could not get out of under your own power. Yes. Was that intentional? I thought about Donna in the escape pod. I thought about the 6 minutes at Kessler that I had spent on the wrong calculation. I thought about the photo in the cracked bezel, which was currently in my jacket pocket because I was not leaving it on a ship being towed somewhere, and which I had not looked at directly in now approximately 11 days. The plan required me to be at the center, I said. Whether I could get out from the center was a separate question. I focused on the plan. Ora Van Thale nodded slowly. The council, he said, would like to formally request that in future engagements, Sergeant Commander Voss include her own survival as a variable in her operational planning. It was, as formal requests go, the gentlest one I had ever received. I will note the request, Speaker, I said. We are also, he said, authorizing the classification of your engagement method in the Council Military Codex as a formally documented tactical approach. Our analysts have proposed a designation. He looked at a document in front of him. The Voss encirclement, he said. I looked at him. That is a terrible name, I said. It is the name the analysts proposed. It is named after me, and I am asking you to reconsider. The record will note your objection. Ora Van Thale said, and the absolutely minimal shift in his expression told me everything I needed to know about how much good my objection was going to do. The session continued for another hour. There were procedural motions and formal acknowledgments and one very long statement from the representative of a species called the Ova Thale, who wanted to express their profound admiration for what I had done in a way that took significantly longer than my actual attention span could comfortably accommodate. I stood at the speaker's platform and listened and drank a second glass of water that another aide had quietly replaced while I was not paying attention. Afterward, in the corridor outside the chamber, fear found me. She handed me a printed copy of her Paper, the one with 17 reads. On the front page, in handwriting that was meticulous and slightly cramped, the way that people who spend a lot of time writing in small notebooks tend to write. She had added an 18th tally mark in the reads column. For the record, she said. I took the paper. Thank you, I said. She nodded and walked away. I stood in the corridor of station Vetera 6 and looked at the tally mark for a moment. Then I folded the paper and put it in my jacket pocket next to the photo. Earth Allied Defense Command met with me. The following morning, there was a protocol review as expected. There was a formal notation in my file regarding the deviations as expected. There was a conversation about the Kessler incident. That was harder than the council session, and shorter, which was the right way to do it. At the end of the meeting, my commanding officer, a quiet and precise woman named Colonel Adele Burke, who had been running Earth Allied Defense's outer corridor operations for 9 years and who expressed approval roughly as often as solar eclipses occurred on a given planet, looked at me for a moment and said, "You are being offered a field promotion to full commander." I heard. Do you have a response? Can I have coffee first? She looked at me for another moment. There is coffee in the anteroom, she said. Take your time. I went and got the coffee. It was not particularly good coffee, the kind made from powder in a military station's anteroom with water that had been recycled one too many times, but it was hot and it was there and I drank it, standing at the window looking out at the docking bay where the unincorporated was sitting in a repair cradle. She was going to be fine. New thruster array hull patches, a new console on the bridge that would be clean and uncracked and would have exactly no photograph wedged into the bezel. I was going to fix that last part personally. The Voss encirclement, still a terrible name. I was going to be hearing it for the rest of my career. I finished the coffee. I thought about 47 ships pointing at me and deciding one by one that they could not cleanly resolve where I was. I thought about the line on the route plotter that went to the center and stopped. I thought about Donna in the escape pod, making the face she made when she agreed with me, and found it personally offensive. I took the photo out of my pocket. I looked at it directly, 6 faces messy and grinning in the way people grin when someone tells them to hold still for a photo and they are constitutionally incapable of holding still. I put it back. I went back into the meeting room and accepted the promotion. 3 weeks later, I was back on the unincorporated with a new crew and a new mission brief and a console that had a clean bezel, which I fixed on the first day by pressing the corner until it cracked in just the right place and wedging the photo in where it belonged. The new crew watched me do this without comment, which told me they had read the mission file. Smart people. I opened the engine diagnostic, reviewed the new thruster specs, pulled up the first waypoint on the mission route, and opened a log channel out of habit. This is Commander Yara Voss, I said. Aboard the unincorporated, currently en route to Depot 12 with a manifest of replacement coolant units. A pause. I am not surrounded at this time. I looked at the sensor display, clean and quiet, nothing but transit lanes and stars and the long ordinary distance between here and there. Working on it, I said. I closed the log and started the drives. 47 ships. And I was the dangerous one. Mother of Detroit, I still think about. That sometimes,